All right, so let's do some Pesach learning. Seder night is just a few hours away, a few nights away. We're almost there. And just, I know for myself, I love to learn more and to connect more. It just makes the night more exciting. I get excited to share things at the table. And hopefully what Rabbi Grodner are hoping to share with you guys tonight will allow you guys to share something, to take something from this, and be able to share something of your inspiration, of your part of the story to share this Seder night as well. So I'm just going to present a little bit here. I'm going to warm it up for Rabbi Grodner, and then I'm going to pass it over to him. So I've chosen a few sections from the Hagaddah, and with an explanation of the Maharal. And I'm very excited to share this with you. I hadn't seen this before. This is something that I came across a couple weeks ago that I found to be very inspiring. I hope everybody enjoys it as well. So if you see the picture here, can everyone see the picture here? The selfies that Am Yisrael took in Mitzrayim. There's actually an incredible number of pictures that are not actually selfies, right? But computer generated. This is, these AI generated pictures is something we're seeing a lot of lately. And there's a whole group of them. They go through all the plagues. It looks like people actually taking selfies from themselves as they're coming out of Egypt. It has all the plagues as well. It's really amazing. Anyway, so I took from some of these pictures so that you guys can see as well. Here we have the Jews building, see the sweat on their brow. So what I'd like to share with everyone tonight, is an idea that I call the night God tells the story of taking you out of Egypt. Usually we think about Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, this very special mitzvah of telling the story, that we tell the story of God taking us out. So much so that we don't even see barely any other characters. Moshe is not mentioned in the Hagaddah. He's hinted to, but he's not mentioned outright. The night is really focused on God. However, what I'd like to share with everyone today is that we can really see each and every one of ourselves in the Hagaddah as well. Okay, here is just the very beginning of the section called Magid, where we start to tell the story before people get too hungry. Every time I see the words Avadim Hayinu, the little jingle comes into my head, right? Avadim Hayinu. At the Seder, there's always someone that tries to sing the whole rest of the paragraph in that little sing-song. It never works. Just the first two words, and then, Mitzrayim, and then they keep going. Okay, we won't try that. Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves to Paro in the land of Egypt, and the Lord our God took us out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched forearm. And if the Holy One, blessed be He, had not taken our ancestors from Egypt, behold, we and our children, our children's children, would all be enslaved to Paro in Egypt. Now I want to focus on that second section here. If the Holy One, blessed be He, had not taken our ancestors from Egypt, behold, we and all our children, our children's children, would all be enslaved to Paro in Egypt. So it's a strange thing to say. I mean, eventually, wouldn't we have come out? Maybe there would be a military coup, a charismatic leader beyond that generation that would come and take Am Yisrael out, or Paro would die, or eventually the Egyptian would die off, the Egyptian empire would end, and we would come out. We would never come out had it not been for God taking us out. It seems strange. There's Paro, a selfie of Paro. So on this point, see with the Maharal in his work, which goes through beyond the Hagaddah, many other topics around Pesach and Gvor Hashem, chapter 52. So the Maharal says as follows. First he quotes, and if the Holy One, blessed be He, had not taken our ancestors from Egypt, behold, we and our children's children will all be enslaved to Paro in Egypt. So he says, the Maharal, one cannot say that even though it was God who took them out, they could have come out in a subsequent generation. If God had not taken us out, we would have been eternally enslaved. So the first thing the Maharal points out is read the text literally. Chazal did not make a mistake. They actually meant what they said, and they said what they meant. If we had not come out then, we would still be there. We would have been eternally enslaved. How does this work? He says, when God took Israel out of Egypt, Israel was like a fetus being born in that moment. And when Israel came out, they were born like a new nation. Therefore, it's only possible that God could have brought them out. So the Midrash picks up on this as well. I think the Maharal is probably drawing from that Midrashic image. The shepherd birthing the baby calf from the womb of his flock. There's something here that only God could do. God's fingerprint is all over this. This is a God-sized job, right? Says the Maharal, there's no other way that this could have happened. Whether it was because the might of Egypt or because of the weakness of Israel at that time, he doesn't really mention it. But what is important for us to grasp here is that this is a birthing process. And God was the only nursemaid that could have pulled us out. It was a divine job, and God was the only one that could have done it. Okay? That's going to be critical as we go forward. No other charismatic leader, no other military leader could have come. We would have been stuck there because we had no one to birth us and bring us into the world. There's the locust. That guy does not look happy. Okay, back to the Hagaddah. Keep that in mind what the Maharal said. We're going to use it as we go forward. This is one of the most famous parts in the Hagaddah. There's a line here that we sometimes might miss that I'd like to focus on. So in the Hagaddah, it says in each and every generation, a person is obligated to see himself as if he left Egypt. As it is stated, and you shall explain to your son that day, for the sake of this, did the Lord do this for me in my going out of Egypt. So it has to be a personal experience. We want to see ourselves as coming out. So the whole Seder table is all of these different props for the play that we try to experience, not just what they experienced back then, but we try to get a taste of that experience in the moment. Now, here's the section that I underlined, though, that we kind of pass over. Lo et avotenu bilvad. Sorry, one second. Okay. Lo et avotenu bilvad ga'ala kodesh baruch hu. Not only our ancestors did the Holy One, blessed be He, redeem. Ela af otanu ga'al imahem. But rather also us together with them did He redeem. So we are so focused on the idea that we have to live in the moment and ourselves come out of Egypt. What does it mean that we have to understand that He redeemed us as well? Seemingly, we would understand that, because God brought our ancestors out of Egypt, so therefore, since we come from our ancestors, so therefore, we are the recipients of that redemption. And therefore, God took us out as well. That's the way that I always understood it. The Maharal is going to add something beautiful here. There they are, working on the pyramids again. Okay, back to the Maharal. This is what he says. He says, God is the one who took Israel out from Egypt, as we said. It could only have been God. No other way could we have come out. Now he elaborates on that point. He says, but God did not only take out that generation, rather God took out all the generations. Like it says in the Hagaddah, not only our ancestor did the Holy One, blessed be He, redeem, but rather also us with them did He redeem. Now the Maharal is going to clarify the point. Imagine the following. A person is in a particular country, and a wise person comes and says, get out! War is coming to this country, right? A Russian comes over to the border to Ukraine and says, Russia's invading, you better get out while you can. The person leaves the country and is saved from the war and has a family with many children and grandchildren. So that's the case that we thought it was. That's exactly how I explained what I understood to be the reading of the Hagaddah. But the Maharal says, in this case, we would not say that the wise man saved the person and his offspring together. He says, no, it doesn't work that way. Rather, we would say that he saved the individual person. And this salvation eventually benefited the children. This is only fitting for God, since everything emanates from the divine. Excuse me, I think that sentence is supposed to go at the end. A small mistake there. But the Maharal says, no, that's not the way it works. Just because this person came and said, war, get out, and the children 2 or 3 generations afterwards were saved, That doesn't mean that the wise man, saved that next generation. He just saved that individual person. But the rest of them were not saved by that man. He says, but this is not the case with Egypt. God placed his eyes on the entirety of Klal Yisrael, the first and the last, and God took them all out. And then this is where the sentence is supposed to go. This is only fitting for God, since everything emanates from the divine. In other words, God looked into all of the generations when it was time for Am Yisrael to come out of Mitzrayim. And he said, you know what? I got to get Rabbi Grodner out of there. I got to get Bati and Joel and Lior and Shani and Lance. And I can't see the rest of the people on the screen, but I have to get them out of there, because the language the Maharal uses is God is kolel hakol. God includes all. God sees all. God knows all. So it wasn't just that generation that lived there, but it was all of us today that God needed to bring out in order. And so therefore he brought them out, but not just them, all of us. So again, it's a literal reading of that. It doesn't mean that God took out that generation so that we could live however many generations afterwards. It means that God saw us and took us out as well. And if we're talking about the original point in the Hagaddah, which is to see ourselves as coming out of Egypt, I think this is a beautiful way to be able to experience on Seder night that incredible hashgacha, that divine presence in the life of Am Yisrael, which is totally unlike any other nation in the world. We shouldn't be here. And on a personal level, if I'm able to sit back at least one night a year, if not more, and think about all the ways that God is involved in my story and took me out from my narrow places. The word Mitzrayim connected to the word Mitzarim, narrow places. And God took me out as well and brought me back home to Eretz Yisrael to be able to build my family here. That's just incredible. That's incredibly inspiring and a beautiful meditation, I think, to have on Seder night. So as we're sitting around the table and we're acting it out and we're telling the story, as I mentioned at the beginning, yes, we're telling a narrative that unites all of Am Yisrael. But it unites us not only because we share that same story, it unites us because God looked and saw all of us, the potential of all of us. And because of that, God brought all of us as well. So I bless us all that on Seder night, we're able to feel that broader hashgacha, that God took Am Yisrael out of Egypt, and we're part of that story. But to be able to really see ourselves from the narrow places in our own lives where God has taken us out. And to those places where God hasn't taken us out, this is a great time to ask. It's a great time to open up and share those things. There's a certain power in Pesach, the power of spring, the power of new beginnings that we're starting now. And I bless everyone at those places, those narrow places that we haven't yet come out of. So we're able to call to all of us come out of those together. I wish everyone a Chag Sameach, a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, and really to be able to experience that hashgacha, that inspiration of Seder night. That's what I wanted to share with everybody. I'm going to stop presenting, and I'm going to turn over the mic to my dear partner and Rav Grodner. Very excited to hear from you as well, Rabbi Grodner.
Thank you very much, Rav Yonatan. Thank you for your very inspiring words and the words of the Maharal. And a great important lesson for all of us. I want to thank every person here who took the time to study a little bit of Hagaddah this evening. It's wonderful that you're here. One of Batya is a friend that goes back, I won't say how many years, Batya, but I've known you for many, many, many years, going way back to the old country. And I'm happy to see that you're with us. And Celeste, and wonderful to see you again. And Joel and Lior. Lior, we'll never forget your bar mitzvah. It was one of the most memorable events in our Beit Midrash program. And we hope that you'll be back and celebrate with us again. And Bob, wonderful to have you with us. Shani, you were a tremendous help to us when you were with us in the Beit Midrash program, and we hope that you'll be able to join us again in the near future. And you won. Shalom. Happy to see you too. You has been a devoted student coming to my classes. And last but not least is our dear friend Lance. Lance is really not only a personal friend of mine, but he's a very, very dear friend of the Beit Midrash program. And I have the privilege of studying with Lance each and every week. And I see him growing in his knowledge in tremendous proportions. Continue your learning, Lance. I'd like to focus for a while on a few words of the Rambam. But before I begin, I'd like to just share with you an insight that I learned from a seventh grader I never knew before. I was always bothered by the question of why did the Malach HaMavet kill the Shochet? Why did the angel of death kill the slaughterer? What did the slaughterer do that he deserves death? So some people say that, well, everyone's got to die at some time, so he had to die as well. But it seems that he did something wrong. I always thought perhaps he should not be doing slaughtering after he drank 4 cups of wine. Because when you're drunk, you shouldn't be slaughtering animals. But this young man came up with a wonderful idea. He said the angel of death is a vegetarian, and that's why he killed him. Now, we're going to take a look at the words of the Rambam, Perek Zayin, 7th chapter of Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah. I'll read the text and I'll translate. Mitzvat Aseh Shel Torah is a positive command of the Torah. L'saper, to relate, to tell, Banisim v'niflaot, the miracles and the wonders, shenasu lavotenu b'Mitzrayim, that were performed for our ancestors in Egypt, B'leil Chamisha Asar b'Nisan, on the night of the 15th of Nisan. This statement made by the Rambam, probably deliberate on the part of the Rambam, could be read in 2 ways. It could mean that on the night of the 15th of Nisan, we are obligated to tell the story of the Exodus. Or it could mean that on the night of the 15th, we relate the miracles and wonders that occurred to our ancestors in Mitzrayim on the night of the 15th. In other words, the miracles that occurred then, those are the miracles that we must relate at the Seder. That's the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. The miracles that occurred in Egypt. That explains a phenomenon in the Rambam's Hagaddah. There's a complete section in the Rambam's Hagaddah that's missing, that's found in almost every other Hagaddah. The section that begins with Rabbi Yossi Haglili. This section reads as follows. There were 3 Tanaim, 3 great rabbis of the Mishnah, who were arguing as to the number of plagues that existed in Egypt and the number of plagues that existed at the splitting of the Red Sea or the Reed Sea. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says there were 10 plagues in Egypt, as the Torah says, but there were 50 at the Red Sea. I'll call it the Reed Sea, which is probably a better translation of Yam Suf, the Reed Sea. So therefore you have 10 in Egypt and 50 at the sea. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, he says in Egypt there were 40 plagues, and on the Reed Sea there were 200 plagues. And Rabbi Akiva says there were 50 plagues in Egypt and 250 at the Reed Sea. Now let's think about those numbers for a moment. We have 60, we have 10 and 50 is 60, according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili's opinion. According to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, we have 40 and 200, 240. So 240 and 60 make up 300. And according to Rabbi Akiva, there are 50 and 250. That's another 300. So altogether, Putting all those plagues together, we come to 600 plagues. Add to that the 10 plagues themselves that are mentioned in the Torah, and add to that the acronym of Rabbi Yehuda, Yitzach Adash Be'achav, where he compacts the 10 into 3. So you add 3 to the 610, we have 613 plagues. It's a very interesting phenomenon, because if there were 613 plagues in Egypt, the number corresponds to the 613 commandments of the Torah. So this is such a wonderful concept. Why did the Rambam leave it out of his Hagaddah? It's not there. Not only that, but he left out Dayenu, the popular song, Dayenu, Dayenu. Why did he leave that out? And the answer is simple. Whatever did not occur in Egypt, whatever miracle that occurred after leaving Egypt, does not belong on the night of the Hagaddah, the night of the Seder. It can be said later on the 7th day of Pesach, we do have the splitting of the Red Sea, and we do talk about it. But on the night of the Seder, it's limited strictly to the events that occurred in Egypt. And that is why the Rambam does not have this entire section in his Hagaddah. Now, the source, the proof text of the Rambam is Zachor et hayom hazeh asher yatzatem miMitzrayim. Remember that this day from which you left Egypt. Moshe Ne'emar, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. Very interesting parallel. It's almost incomprehensible. Why does the Rambam say that there's an equation between Zachor et hayom hazeh asher yatzatem miMitzrayim, remember this day that you left Egypt, and he equates that with Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho? What does one have to do with the other? Just because of the word Zachor? There are other places in the Torah who mention Zachor. Zachor tashasa lecha Amalek. Zachor tashasa Hashem leMiriam. There are 6 places where the Torah mentions Zachor. Rambam somehow sees an intrinsic relationship between the Zachor, the remembrance of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, and the Zachor of Shabbat. What could that be? What could that be? If we think about Zachor Yom HaShabbat, that in fact is a mitzvah to say Kiddush. What is Kiddush on Friday night? Sanctification of the Shabbat. And what does sanctification of the Shabbat mean? It means that we set Shabbat apart from all the days of the week. Shabbat is not like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Shabbat is a day that is unique unto itself. And that's why we have Kiddush in the beginning of the Shabbat, and we have Havdalah at the end of the Shabbat. By doing that, we are creating an island in time, a day that is cut off from the other 6 days of the week. Says the Rambam, the same is true for the night of Pesach. We remember the Exodus from Egypt every single day, twice a day. When we say the Shema, and the last verse of the Shema reads, Ani Hashem Elokechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lechem l'Elokim, Ani Hashem Elokechem. So the remembrance of the Exodus is every day, twice a day, 365 days a year. But there's only one night of the entire year where we have not just a remembrance, but a sipur, but telling the story, living the story, experiencing the story, experiencing the Exodus, feeling this freedom that we enjoy. That's only one night a week. And therefore, just as Shabbat is unique in terms of the other days of the week, so too is the night of Pesach unique in comparison to all the other days of the year. I like to think of it in the following terms. I see the 6 days of the week as a ring. But on top of that ring, there's a diamond. And that diamond is called Shabbat. There's another ring, much larger than the first, that contains 365 days. And on the top of that ring there's another diamond, and that's the night of Pesach. This is the comparison between Shabbat and the night of Pesach. Zachor et hayom hazeh and Zachor et yom HaShabbat. Continues the Rambam. Uminayin shebalel chamisha asa. How do we know that it should be on the 15th? Where does it say that on the 15th we have the mitzvah to tell the story? Talmud loma v'gadata levincha. You shall tell your child bayom hahu, on that day, lemor. On that day, what day? What day? V'avur zeh asal li Elokim. Because of this, and whenever we have the word zeh, zeh means I'm pointing to something. Zeh, this. Achodesh hazeh lachem. Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu the new moon, so he should know exactly how to calculate the new moon. Achodesh hazeh lachem. The menorah also it says zot, and here also it says bavur zeh. What are we pointing to? What is the zeh pointing to? It's pointing to the matzah and the mora that we have on the table. Bavur zeh asa Hashem li. The matzah and the mora that's on the table, that is the time to tell the story. And there's only one night a year where we have the matzah and the mora on the table, and that's the night of the 15th of Nisan. And we say bavur zeh. Continues the Rambam. Afilu chachamim gedolim chayavim l'sapeh b'tziat Mitzrayim. No matter how much you know, no matter how great a scholar you are, you must tell the story. And don't feel that I know it already, I learned it already, I don't have to do it again, I don't have to tell it again. There's always more to learn. Who taught us that? How did the Rambam know that? He knows that from the Hagaddah itself. Because we have a passage in the Hagaddah of the 5 rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer, if you recall, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. They were stayed up all night in Bnei Brak, and telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim until the students came to tell them, Rabotenu higia zman kriyat shema shel shachrit. It's now time for shachrit. The dawn has occurred. These 5 rabbis are rabbis of the Mishnah. They are the greatest rabbis of their generation. They are members of the Sanhedrin. They know the story very, very, very well. And yet, they were up all night relating the story and studying the Torah, and to find out more and more about the Exodus from Egypt. And I mentioned in my class, you I think you remember that I mentioned that these 5 rabbis, not one had ancestors who were slaves in Egypt. Why is that so? Because the Egyptian society was a caste system, like in India today, perhaps even more so in Egypt. At the bottom of and that's a pyramid. Pyramid represents the strata of society. The lowest strata, the lowest class, were the slaves. They represent the bottom of the pyramid. All the weight is upon them. And who do you think is at the pinnacle of the pyramid? Who's at the very top? None other than Paro himself. And what happened with the Exodus from Egypt is God took the pyramid and turned it upside down. And Paro then was in the bottom, and Bnei Yisrael were at the top. So with this caste system, one of the 12 tribes was exempt from slavery. They were recognized as a priestly class or priestly caste. The tribe of Levi was exempt from slavery. Having said that, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua were both Leviim. Rabbi Tarfon was a Kohen. Kohen, of course, is a member of the tribe of Levi. Rabbi Akiva was a descendant of Gerim, of converts to Judaism. So he obviously did not have ancestors who were slaves in Egypt. And Rabbi what's the last one? Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon was a Kohen. Rabbi Tarfon actually lived at the last years of the Beit HaMikdash. He served in the Holy Temple, Rabbi Tarfon. He was a Kohen. So it's ironic, perhaps this is the hidden message in this story, that even though these rabbis did not have ancestors who were slaves in Egypt, that did not exempt them from the mitzvah of relating the story, of telling the story. And that's why they stayed up all night. It's not a question of whether you yourself were a slave or your ancestors were slaves. Every Jew has to experience the exodus from Egypt. And in this manner, we fulfill the two positive commandments. There are two positive commandments that we fulfill on the night of Pesach. Torah commandments. One is the telling of the story, and the other is the eating of the matzah. All the other mitzvot that we do are midrabanan, they're rabbinic in nature. Whether it be the eating of the maror or the drinking of the 4 cups of wine, and all of the other, the karpas, etc., all of this is the rabbanan. The dioraita, the Torah laws, are two: telling the story and the eating of the matzah. These are two Torah laws. So the night of Pesach is a very special night. It's a night that inspires us, not just that one night, and it really inspires us for the whole year. We concentrate on the experience of freedom, and most important, we try to bring freedom to others. That is why the Hagaddah opens with Holach Ma'anya Dechal Vavatan Le'Eretzrayim. Kol dich v'yete v'yechu, kol ditchach yete v'yefsach. Whoever is hungry, come, join us. Whoever is needy, come, join us. You're welcome. No Jew should be left out from a Pesach Seder. No Jew should be excluded from the celebration of Pesach. Any Jew who wants to participate is welcome. Whether he or she has strong background, weak background, no background, we open our doors and we open our hearts to anyone who wants to participate. And that's the beauty of Pesach. How do we express our freedom? Some people express freedom by going to wild parties, by excess of eating and drinking. That's their freedom. For us, our freedom is expressed in our love for God, our gratitude to God, and the kindness and generosity that we can give to others. That's our freedom. And that's why we open the Hagaddah, we open the Seder night with an open invitation to anyone who wants to come and join. So I want to wish each and every one of you a Chag Kasher V'Sameach. You should have a wonderful, wonderful Chag. Enjoy the freedom. And thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I thank Rav Yonatan for putting this very inspiring evening together.